This is Gene Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast, recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 269, originally aired May 3rd, 2017. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're getting a chance to listen to this. Thanks for spending some time with me today. In today's show, we're going to talk about tapping, acupuncture, and the relationship between the two of those as we continue the conversation, which we started back in August of last year. Before we jump into that, first, big shout out to all the supporters of the Tapping Q&A podcast. If you'd like to support the podcast, all you need to do is go to tappingqa.com/support, or inside of whatever app you're listening to this on your smart device, you will find a link in the show notes to do that. Also, if you have not done so already, we have a free 10-part guide on how you can use tapping and EFT to eliminate self-sabotage. There's audios, there is videos, there are scripts, there's great instructional articles. If you sign up, every couple of days you'll receive another part of the 10 parts. I don't give it to you all at once because I want you to take them one at a time and actually implement them. And so by taking them one at a time, you're going to have the space to be able to do exactly that. Again, absolutely free. Just go to tappingqa.com, click on the big blue button. If you happen to be listening to this right now in the website, up in the right-hand column, there is a blue button that you can click so you can get that in your inbox absolutely free. Today's conversation is with acupuncturist Beth Kearns, and you will probably recall back at episode 232, we had a conversation with Beth about the acupuncturist point of view for the tapping points that we use. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it, if you look in the show notes, you can find a link to it, or if you go to tappingqapodcast.com in our archives, click on episode 232 to hear that conversation. And what she did as we had the conversation is she went one by one through all of the tapping points and talked about which element it's associated with, which meridian it's on, and the particular points, what an acupuncturist would use those for. And the podcast was a huge success. It had almost twice the number of downloads of the regular shows because this is something that us as tappers are interested in. We're tapping on these points, but the people I've talked to are always looking for more. So I brought Beth back for another conversation. This time, we talked more from the point of view of the work that she does and how she uses the acupuncture points and what she is looking for in what she does. The conversation itself, we kind of jump into it abruptly because of the way that it was recorded. The conversation itself starts out with a conversation between her and I in which she's doing her intake process as if I was a client sitting down to work with her. And all of the answers that I give her would be me a decade ago when I was really struggling with social anxiety before I found my way to tapping. So I put myself back in that moment. So the first part, the first 5 or 6 minutes, is just you see the way, as a practitioner, she asks all sorts of questions. Then we pretend, great, that's done. Now I am a patient on the table. What's the process that she goes through in order to do diagnostics, in order to choose the point that she's going to use, and what she's looking for in that process? So even if it isn't a direct one-to-one correlation, it's such a close cousin to the stuff that we are doing with tapping. I think you're going to find this conversation super, super useful. So without any further ado, let's jump into it. Here is my conversation with Beth Kearns as we talk about an acupuncturist approach to doing work. What would be your process? How would you work with them in an issue like that?
Let's see. So I would be curious about how it affects them specifically. So how did they experience anxiety? What are they calling anxiety? From that point, it's like that tells me like if they're even noticing in their body anything, if they're aware of anything, and what their awareness level of their anxiety is. Because some people will come in and just say, they have anxiety and their mind is just going a lot, and others will be experiencing all these physical symptoms.
Great. Okay, so let's say that it is someone who walks in And they say, I'm anxious. You ask a follow-up question. Their response is, well, anytime I am in a social setting with more than 2 or 3 people, it feels like my skin is crawling and there is a part of me that just wants to run for my life.
Do you know what it is about the social situation that you get that response?
I don't. It just feels that way. I just know that that's a gross, horrible situation.
Mm-hmm. And have you found anything that makes it feel better besides running away?
Yeah, not being there. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that in any other situation besides in a social place?
It's mostly social because when I'm at work, I feel competent and comfortable.
And do you ever have the same feeling in the evening or at night when you're asleep? Do you ever wake up with it, or does it affect your sleep?
Not that I know of. If I know I have something coming up the next day, I might be nervous the night before, kind of like test anxiety. But it's not generalized. It's associated with specific instances.
Okay. And you said if you feel it like it makes your skin crawl. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And you just want to run away.
Yeah. Yeah. I just feel like I don't belong there. Like I'm going to be found out as a fraud.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a fraud?
Yeah.
So, and tell me more about that. What's the fraud piece? Like, what do you think that they're going to see?
They're going to see that I am not capable or competent or that I belong. Like they're going to see me as not good enough to belong there.
Does it remind you of anything? Like anything in the past?
I feel like a little kid who is tagging along who, doesn't belong there. It's almost like I'm a little kid with all the older kids, and they're going to find out that I'm just this silly little kid that's there that doesn't belong.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So it's like you're still this young kid, and so today it's feeling the same way. It's like it just triggers that memory of when you were a little kid.
It triggers that sensation. I can't think of a specific time where that was the case because it's not like I'm the oldest. So I wasn't like I was tagging along with the big kids, but that's like if I was to write a story to what it feels like, that's how I feel.
As you talk about it, is there any emotion that comes up around this?
As in, like, do I feel disappointed in myself that I'm experiencing this?
Yeah, that could be. Sure.
It's more of a situation of being frustrated because when I'm in social professional sittings, I never feel it in a professional setting. I only feel it in a social setting.
What do you see as possible, or what is it that you would like to be different?
I would just like to be able to go into social settings and just be comfortable inside of my own skin.
Sure.
Because it impacts me a couple of ways. One, when I am somewhere, it is unenjoyable. And two, there are things that I don't do, which I would have done if I didn't feel this way. Like it becomes a great deterrent to not walk out the door and just stay home and do something at home.
So that is sort of the way I would go with this. And then I would start going into other areas of, is there other things that you want to address with acupuncture? Like what's your health history? What's your diet? All of that.
Okay, so let's pretend that nothing else is going on. I feel healthy otherwise. My diet's fine. This is the isolated instance issue in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being the case, how do you then proceed? Are you thinking in terms of particular points that you're using? Like what is, as you in action and thinking in terms of the meridian system, where me as a tapper, I just tap on all the points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, okay, so while you're sitting there and I'm with you and I'm talking to you and listening to you and observing you, I'm taking in cues and like I'm looking at your color, odor, sound, and emotion. So that gives me an indication of which element may be the source of your, like the root imbalance. And then from there, then we go to the table and they would take your pulses and do some diagnostic work there and put it all together.
So when you say pay attention, I understand some of those things that you mentioned, color and things like that. What do you mean by odor? Like what are you noticing there?
Well, with odor, so with each of the 5 elements, they all have an odor that's associated with them. So, like with water, it's the smell is like a putrid, and everybody has an odor, and every emotion. So the same, it's like it basically you could say every emotion has an odor. So we all, like, we might have our body odor, but then there's this other odor that is given off. And that is a clue of where the source is, where the source is not. So it's like the color is on the face, then there's the odor, and then, which can be a combination of odors even. And then there's the sound, which is kind of like what we call an inappropriate sound, which is, it's more like, I don't really like that word, but it's more like, it doesn't quite match the situation, or it might feel a little jarring. So an example might be, like if somebody's really shouting at you and at the same time you're feeling all this anger, but yet they're talking about something really joyful and exciting in their life, but you feel like you're kind of getting in trouble. That's kind of like an inappropriate sound and emotion.
So it's not even necessarily inappropriate, but it sounds like it's disconnected from what's going on.
Yeah.
Like if I'm talking about something really horrific and my affect is really, really flat, or I'm saying like, and I did a great job, but my voice cracks and it sounds like I'm really nervous when I'm doing it, and the words that I'm saying and the energy of what I'm saying aren't jiving.
Exactly.
Okay. And so as you're doing this, as you're paying attention to skin color, if someone goes flush, they get red, whatever, the sounds, the odors, what are you doing inside of your head? Are you drawing one-to-one connections, or are you just kind of building this collection of data points that you then are going to investigate further in a more specific way?
Well, for me, it's mostly like my body is like a sensing tool, and like it's I don't know if barometer is the right word or not, but it feels like it's just like I'm just letting it all land, and I'm just getting a feeling. I'm getting a sense for where this person is. The best way I can describe it, and at the same time, yeah, I'm writing down, like, if I do see or notice one of those points. And then there also, it's like, depending on what they're telling me, I'm taking that in as well. And then, it's, of course, it's all like where, what the rapport is with the person so far and how much I can dive in and ask and gathering all this information, and then even more information is gathered when I start to do the physical exam.
And so what it sounds like is, and I can see this from my own experience, the more clients that I've worked with, the faster I start noticing patterns and start making connections. You're kind of describing this, I just have this sense. And for me, it doesn't feel like intuition. For me, it feels like I have just becoming much more proficient at putting the data points together to figure out what might be a reasonable story for me to investigate. I think of, the difference between listening to music, listening to an orchestra, and then studying music for 4 years at a music school and then hearing the exact same recording. Like, I'm going to notice all of these things in a different way instantaneously. And it's not like I'm processing it, but it's just showing up because of that experience. You do this intake, you have this conversation, you now get them on the table. What happens once they're on the table? Like what is the process? What's the next step?
So usually, so the first thing I do is I let them know about pulses. I give them a little bit of education about pulse taking and what I'm doing and looking for. So that would be something like, I'm going to be taking your pulses often, and there's 6 pulses in each wrist, and depending on where they're at, of course, with the basis of information, I might say, acupuncture is really, like, everything I'm going to be doing is about balancing your chi or your energy. And the energy flows through us in about 12 main meridians. And these are pathways or highways of energy, where this of energy. And I'm just going to check in with all of these pathways. And I want to see 3 things. I'm going to be looking at how much is coming through. So what's the volume of energy coming through? And what's the quality? There can be at least 26 different qualities to a pulse. And then the last thing is it blocked anywhere? So that's like maybe like a hose, like a kink in your hose, and the water's coming through. That kind of thing. So I explain that, and I take their pulses, and
when you're taking the pulse, when I hear you use the phrase taking a pulse, I think of my doctor or my nurse putting 2 fingers, checking what my heart rate is. Physically, is it the same thing? Are you touching someone in the same way? Or are you doing something different when you're taking a pulse?
It's similar. I use 3 fingers. I use one hand at a time. Meaning I'm taking pulses on one wrist at a time, but I'm taking one pulse at a time, one of the 6 pulses at a time. So it's much lighter contact.
And you said that there are 26 different kind of characteristics to that pulse.
Well, there could be. They may not have, they might just have 1 or 2.
Okay.
But there's like 20 possible.
Okay. And what would a possible, if you're noticing something, what are you noticing?
Right. It could be that their pulse is really low, like there's barely anything coming through. It can feel really empty. Is this what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, it's like it can feel really empty. So, like, you put a little pressure on, and it's like there's like nothing behind it. They're so depleted. Their chi's so depleted. Or it might feel really taut, like a rope. Or it could feel like it's there, and then all of a sudden it disappears. It could be irregular. It could feel really pushy.
So then after you've taken pulses and you've gotten data, what then happens?
Then I will check their, what we call the 3 jowl, which is, I'll place my hand right on their skin, on their stomach, so on their, above the navel, below the navel, and then up on the top of the chest, and look for balance there. And that's tells me if there's balance within the triple heater or heating and cooling system. So it's all about looking for balance in everything that I'm doing. So that's just information of like, how's that system functioning? And then after that, I'll go around and I'll check their nails and their hands and their skin, and I'll put my hand, I'll put my hands on their arms and their legs and their hands and their feet, and just feel the temperature. And look for scars. And
why are you looking for scars?
Because energy can get blocked there, especially like if it's in a pathway, if it's right along a path, like a common one is right down the center of somebody's chest, and that's a major meridian. So that way I'll know I should do some work around that. And then I might do blood pressure at that point. And that's for 2 reasons. I'll do blood pressure, number 1, to see if they even know where they're at and if it's okay. Number 2 is like I use something else called moxa in the treatment, an herb right in the person at a point, an acupuncture point. And the moxa, like if there's more than 40 points in difference in somebody's systolic and diastolic blood pressure, then it can drive it farther apart or it can bring it closer together. So I just need to know where they stand on that. And also, something I didn't mention earlier, Jean, is getting a sense of where the person is on every level of body, mind, spirit. So if they're like really cut off, especially on a spirit level, like on an essence level, of if they're just disconnected from themselves, then that's an important thing to address right off the bat. So mostly a feeling, but you can see that in somebody's eyes as well. So sometimes when they're on the table, I'll if I may check that out again. I mean, look directly into their eyes and get a sense of that.
And so when you're doing the treatment, so at this point, based on all of the information that you've gathered, you have a sense of where there's congestion, where there's the wrong set of energy and all that. And then the needles are then used to move it back to that space. Is that what's happening?
The needles are used to move the energy in whatever way is needed to create balance. So it might, if it's stuck, energy blocked or stuck, or congested, as you say, then it helps to clear that up and get it flowing again. Or maybe they need, more energy coming through, or maybe their energy's too agitated and you want to calm it down, or it's very rare that it's excessive energy. And that, so then you use, depending on the needle technique that you use, is how you do that. It's how you affect the energy in that way. So it's not just simply putting the needle in, but it's like, what do you do with it once it's in?
And so one of the presuppositions in using tapping is that we're going near the end of one of those paths or the actual end of it. And the thought being by going to the end, we're getting a chance to get all of it. Is there any thought or validity to that? Like, what's the difference between, there are multiple points along a path. What's the difference between going directly to the third point on the path to do the balance versus doing work at the tip of the path?
So you're saying that the thought is that if you right now that you use the points that are closer to the end.
Yeah. With traditional EFT, we're not using the hundreds of points that you're familiar with. We're using 7 or 12 based on if we're doing a short form or a long form of the protocol. And I'm guessing that there was a sense of just hoping to do ease of use, so we didn't have to learn all of the points and do because when we do something as diagnostically specific as what you're doing, once we start doing the work, we assume it's going to be much more efficient because we're going exactly to the right spot. But what you're talking about is a huge amount of experience and expertise to be able to do that. The thought with the tapping protocols is we'll just go to the end because it's really easy to teach people stuff and it might not clear it as quickly, as clear as effectively, but it's going to have some impact because we're doing something, but because it's more of a blunt force object, it might not be as effective. Like kind of wrestling with that idea, I guess. What would your thoughts or response to something like that?
For me, I feel like sometimes I don't even tap. Like if I'm on a call and there's somebody else talking, or like we're at the retreat, like at my point, I start to get irritated and my points start to get really tender. And I feel like it's more, I wonder, and it seems like to me, like it's the important piece is really the getting into the feeling of what's happening for somebody, like, and helping them see and sense into, like, getting out of their head and getting into their body and into the feeling. Because every time you ask somebody a question, it's like, that's what you're doing, right? You're helping them go deeper and get out of their head. And for me, when I do that, and when I do that in my diamond approach work, my spiritual work, it's like that's when things start to really shift. It's like there's something in the body, like that energy starts to change. you think it starts to shift in a different way than what can happen through our head.
So with that being said, then why then do you use needles with your clients to do that work if it's so valuable just doing the question and the diagnostic piece like you just talked about? Like what is then added on top of that?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. So I don't really know of, well, there aren't that many acupuncturists that do it the way that I do it, with talking to people and helping them get into their body. So I think number one, that's incredibly valuable. And then the second thing is the needles. It's like that's when it assists the body. It assists our energy in a whole nother way. I mean, it's a very it's really direct because I'm directing the energy. It's helping in another way. You know, it's like there's the approach of getting into your body so you're more clear of what's on, and by sensing in. But then when you use a needle or the moxa, you're actually moving it. And the beauty about that is the person doesn't even, like, I don't tell people a lot of what I'm doing. Like, if they ask, I might say something. Yeah, or I will say something, and give them. Often it's kind of a general thing, not always, but it's like I want people to get out of their head. I don't want people to be like, oh, you know, and then take that information and try to manipulate it. You know, I mean, I'm sure on some level, some people could, you know, clear up a block if they really knew how to work with their energy, if they were that in tune. But that's one thing the needles do, is I can move the energy to have it flow a different way and to help it become unstuck.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like two different approaches. In a way, it's kind of, in some ways, it's doing similar things. At least that's my approach.
Okay. And what would be the difference between, so the way I understand it, along each of the individual channels, there's multiple points along the way. So there's specific entry points that's more effective to go there along that path. What would be the difference in effectiveness for you if you were off by 2 points, or you consciously chose to go 2 points away from the place that you thought was going on? Not that you would do that, not that you would intentionally choose to go somewhere else, but like, what would be the tangible difference between, let's say I'm supposed to put it in point 2 and I put it in point 4 instead?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a multi-layered one. So one, like sometimes you can do that and still get the same result. Like, so there's a point, an example is there's a point that's right in the center or right next to the nipple. And so that point is important for helping to clear a block, but you can only do that on a man. So then, then the next point down on the meridian is used. Or there's a couple other scenarios like that where you don't want to use that specific point for various reasons, and you can use the next one down and still get the same effect.
And so as you're doing it, once you start doing work, are you getting feedback over the course of a session and moving things around and adding more points? Or once you've started, we just kind of sit there and let that thing clear where it is?
It varies a lot for me. Often I am checking in with the pulses as the treatment goes. Like sometimes I put the needles in and I take them right back out. That's the technique. It's in and out. And so I'm checking what's going on with their pulses and what's shifting and how they're doing. I'm looking at them as well, and observing and just seeing what's happening. And then other times, like the needles go in and they're there for 20 minutes.
And why would they stay there for 20 minutes? Like what would be the need for that, and what's the impact of that?
The basis, the real boiled down version is when you leave the needles in, it can be used as a sedation technique so that it's calming. And it's calming to the energy. And then when you put the needles in and take them right back out, that can be used, that's more of a tonification or a strengthening of the chi or the energy.
And how long does someone typically spend on the table having this done?
I'd say typically about 25 minutes there on the table. And so my appointments are an hour, so I'm like spending the first part talking with them and the second part reading them.
So I found that conversation super, super fascinating. And I apologize for the beginning and the ending of that conversation being a little bit abrupt. And there's kind of a funny story behind that. When Beth and I had gotten on the phone and we were just kind of talking through what we were going to have the interview be about, I hit record right away because I usually do that. And as we were kind of poking around the edges into what we were doing, it just turned into this really natural conversation. So I made the decision very early on that we were just going to keep having the conversation and record the whole thing. It wasn't until well into the interview that Beth even realized that it was an interview, which is fine. She was great with us sharing this. That's the reason why there's a little bit of a jump at the beginning and a little bit of a harsh ending, because it wasn't your traditional interview, but I think it was super useful. If you haven't done so already, make sure you go back and listen to episode 232. It has a bunch of practical information about us as tappers and the points that we tap on from an acupuncturist point of view. You can find that in the entire Tapping Q&A podcast archive at tappingqandapodcast.com. Every single one of those podcasts in the archive, we are over 325 between full episodes, partial episodes, bonus episodes, two-part episodes, tap-along audios, instructions, interviews. All of them are just sitting there free of charge. Literally hundreds of hours of training for you, absolutely free. If you go to tappingqandapodcast.com and you download the Tapping Q&A app, again, it's free for both Android and Apple devices. In your pocket, you will have with you access to every single one of those audios. You don't have to go back to the website. In addition to that, a number of the tap-along audios, I've also included the tapping scripts in the app, so you don't even have to hit play. You can just go to the topic, read the script, and tap along to it. It's a free resource. Why wouldn't you take it with you? It's really, really super great. You can subscribe to the Tapping Q&A podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Music Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio. All of those places, again, the resource is free. If you know someone in your life who would find this particular conversation useful, please be our ambassador. You don't have to spam your entire inbox, but if you know someone in your life who could use this, it would mean the world to me. If you would pass it along, it would really honor the amount of time and effort that was put into doing a recording like this, between the conversation and the editing after the fact. And every single time another person listens to an audio like this, we're getting an opportunity to multiply the healing power of the information here and how tapping is used in a larger way. Questions, comments, topics, possible guest suggestions, you can always contact me at Gene, Gene, at tappingqanda.com. If you're on the website, all you need to do is go up to the menu bar at the top, click on the contact link. You can send me an email there. If you have the app, you can email me from inside of the app. You can leave me a voicemail from right inside of the app. It means the world to me when you do something like that. For the Tapping Q&A podcast, this is Gene Monterastelli. I hope you have a great day, and I will talk to you real soon. Bye-bye. The Tapping Q&A podcast is copyright Gene Monterastelli Tapping Q&A 2016. All views expressed by guests are those of the guests and not necessarily of Gene Monterastelli or Tapping Q&A.